we have shown you in detail the charges filed by New York Federal Court against Gautam Adani, but there are several coincidences that we need to also talk about while these charges have been filed. Let's go directly and show you these coincidences and then examine whether they could have any link to this case. And then, of course, we will also get you expert opinion on what this entire story, or rather this news, is all about. Okay, to begin with, we have to in fact take you through some of the recent updates that have transpired in some of the surrounding areas or states or countries that concern us directly or indirectly. Canada's security agencies have suspected that the Prime Minister knew of the plot to kill a Sikh activist, which is of course Mr. Nijjar is whom we are talking about. The charge sheet was filed the same day. Another coincidence is, of course, whistleblowers work for Canadian Pension Fund, and some of these whistleblowers are of course also tied up with the Canadian government and in fact related to some of the people who would want to harm India's growth story, who would want to perhaps affect India's growth story as well. Well, charges in New York, same place where Trump was indicted, and this also happens to be a Democratic stronghold at this point in time. And of course, everything that we see right now is being done under the Democratic government of Joe Biden. Charge sheet has been in fact put in 2 months before Trump takes office. A lot of things have gone on badly or handled badly throughout the world, as we also can talk about what's happening in Russia and Ukraine and how the Russians have upgraded their nuclear policy. George Soros's quiet overall of the US justice system is also something which is a coincidence at this point in time. He's given funds for campaigns of the US district attorneys, some of them who are directly or indirectly responsible for bringing in these charges against Mr. Adani. And Biden authorizes Ukraine to use long-range US weapons in Russia, which is of course being hailed or being criticized as a very, very irresponsible move. And of course, the charge sheet was filed 2 days after Biden escalated Ukraine tension by allowing US missiles into Russia. In fact, Russia has also responded by using some of these long-range missiles on their own. And of course, these missiles are very much capable of having nuclear warheads. They can cause damage. They can travel up to 5,500 kilometers and cause havoc in Ukraine, and perhaps Ukraine will not be able to do anything about it. Professor Madhav Nalapa, the editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, with us on the show. Mr. Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, also joins us on the program. Last but not the least, Dr. Sharad Kohli, senior economist, with us on the platform here as well. Professor Nalapa, I'll begin with you. Well, it's like deja vu. We're talking about these allegations, this indictment against Mr. Adani and a few of his associates. Bribery charges have been levied, and I'm not sure how these charges are proved or how they are tracked, what kind of sources and what kind of confirmations has the US Department of Justice used. But the fact of the matter is very clear, sir, that whatever has gone in a run-up to this particular news or this update cannot be a coincidence. There seems to be a conspiracy behind this. There seems to be a larger force at work that wants to derail India's growth story. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, Vineet, I'd like to say that definitely there are forces at work that want to derail India's growth story. The Sino-Wahhabi lobby, for one. I mean, when your enemy smiles at you, you better be doubly careful because then you have a major problem. So that is true. And these lobbies are active in several countries in the world, including in the United States. But as far as this is concerned, whether this is connected with that, I do not know. But of course, it is a reality that this kind of charge against a businessman of the level of Mr. Gautam Adani, coming after the Hindenburg charges, etc., which frankly just disappeared. But hopefully that these charges will be proven to be completely false, because it does have the potential of not derailing but marginally denting the Indian growth story. The Indian growth story cannot be derailed so long as India is on the right track, the right strategy in Cold War 2.0. And that right strategy is to choose a side very clearly. The time for sitting on the fence is over. You choose a side in Cold War 2.0, and as far as Trump is concerned, he has filled his cabinet with people who are, I wouldn't call them China hawks, I'd call them China realists, and they feel India will be on their side. And I think we have to give a very clear signal that we are on on their side. And I think thereafter you're going to see a rapid escalation of growth, because you're going to see a significant improvement in the commercial ties between the US and other democracies in the West, etc., and India. So that is the geopolitical situation. As far as this is concerned, I'm quite perplexed as to how something of this magnitude got through the US justice system so far. It has gone before a grand jury, and a grand jury, a majority of whom would have said that these charges are such that they warrant a trial, and now it has reached the trial stage. And now that is a very, that is almost, that's the final stage. So I'm very surprised it's gone to this level, and I'm really surprised that it's not been, challenged earlier, because reaching this level is really quite significant. I'm not sure that this is an attempt to derail the Indian growth story, or this is an issue in which information was provided to individuals by information or misinformation or disinformation about Mr. Adani was provided to individuals who are corporate rivals of us. I don't know which of this is the situation. But of course, as far as the Indian growth story is concerned, I'm not concerned so long as we have a correct strategy in Cold War 2.0, the way the Chinese had a correct strategy in Cold War 1.0. They took sides and they came out the winners. They became the second largest economy in the world. And today you have Cold War 2.0. China is now the target country. India is the favored partner. And I'm very certain the government under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who is extremely, sharp in such matters, will take the proper decisions to ensure the growth story remains intact. So, as far as this matter is concerned, Vineet, quite frankly, the matter has reached this advanced stage of a trial, and I am surprised that it was not proven to be false much earlier, because this is a very advanced stage for it to have reached. And now I think the question is, now it will be obviously fought in a court, and I'm very certain that Mr. Adani will say that he is not guilty, and once that happens, it becomes subject to a jury trial, whether in absentia or something else. So I'm surprised it has gone to this level without, any kind of a corrective being issued as of now. So that is, but whether what's happening in Canada, there's clearly that same lobby working hard. And as far as that lobby is concerned, they would love to have a major Indian businessman go down in flames. But of course, according to what I've read, the states which are supposed to be affected are states which are run by opposition parties. So if any alliance has got a reason to be embarrassed, it would be the INDI alliance, because I think many of the states that are being mentioned are opposition parties. But again, what is perplexing is solar energy is now getting cheaper and cheaper. And solar panels are also getting cheaper and cheaper. So I see no way in which it would be impossible to sell energy, solar energy, except with this kind of improper method. Because the solar energy by itself is rapidly getting cheaper and cheaper. Solar panels are getting cheaper and cheaper. And I'm therefore perplexed by this entire matter. And I certainly hope I mean, I certainly hope that Mr. Adani comes out of it successfully vindicated and is completely shown to be innocent of these charges. I certainly hope that this happens because, after all, so many jobs depend on the conglomerate that he runs and that he's basically controls, and these jobs would be at risk if there were any issues. So I'm certainly, keen to ensure that his innocence is proved, and I think it ought to have been proved much earlier. But at least now, I'm certain every effort will be made to prove his innocence, and then not only will the growth story be intact, but the Adani group of businesses will also be intact beneath. Thank you.
Gautam, do you think that this stage was in fact unexpected? One would never actually imagine that it would get to this, and as was rightly observed by Professor Nalapata as well.
Well, this is round 3 of the attack on Adani. Round 1 took him practically to zero from a very high pedestal where he was one of, if not the richest in the world, certainly in the top 5. From there, he disappeared off the map and he promptly came back. That was Hindenburg attack 1. Hindenburg attack 2 was a damp squib. It went nowhere. Now you've got the American deep state combined with the Canadians with attack number 3. The first thing that I can say is this is very peculiar to put together a 54-page dossier with a lot of detail that is illegally obtained, because there is no way that you can get into a person's bedroom and bathroom and sitting room and his notes, personal notes, without it being an illegal invasion of privacy, if it is not fictional in the first place. Now, the basic premise that the various 5 states had to be bribed in order to buy solar power is itself suspect, because solar power is cheaper, solar power is the future, the government is backing it, the world is backing it in terms of climate change and renewable energy. So it doesn't make sense that it is a failure and a difficult thing to sell in India without extensive bribery to the extent of over 2,000 crores. Now, bribery in terms of state government officials is possible, but whether it is possible for the reasons attributed, I don't see. And also to say that Adani would be directly involved in the bribery to sit down and talk to people as to the level and degree of the bribes, it all sounds like a made-up job, which I believe will be thrown out in court because of lack of proof. The allegations, piled on allegations, piled on allegations. The Adani stocks have taken a hit, but I'm sure they will recover as soon as the Indian government turns a blind eye to all of this, because it is spurious. If it isn't spurious, then the opposition states, 4 out of 5 of the states were run by the opposition. There should be hundreds of people rounded up and put in detention, if not in jail, preventive sort of, and the CBI and the ED and all the rest of them should get to work. Adani is not, there's a bribe giver and a bribe taker. If there are as many as are claimed by this, then you should be rounding up hundreds of people. I don't see any of this taking place. What has happened is a 600 million bond issue has been impacted in the United States. I do believe this is the last gasp of the Biden government as well as the Trudeau government to try and harm the Indian growth story by targeting one of its leading lights, Mr. Adani and all his companies. And it will fail just like the other two in a matter of days. This is going nowhere. And a district court in New York, which is a Democratic-run state, it is really no big deal. And in addition to that, they've also got a number of prosecutions and even convictions on the president-elect Trump, also in New York. It's an irony because Trump really comes from New York. Mar-a-Lago is where he plays golf, but he built his career and fortune in New York, in Manhattan. Right. So the whole thing, I think, is a damp squib. The Russians have let off an ICBM already because Biden is trying a scorched earth policy before he leaves. The Democrats are devastated that they lost the elections. They didn't expect it. They didn't think it was this bad. Now they are striking out of spite in multiple ways. And a person like Trudeau is very similar in his temperament and outlook. Vineet.
All right. Dr. Kohli. Motivated indeed. We've spoken about this just a few minutes ago as well. And, just like earlier times, the Adani Group is going to, in fact, get over this. And, the stock market memory is not that strong. They're going to forget about this. And, the Adanis are going to come back more powerful, and that perhaps in the long run will also dissuade the conspirators who are trying to bring this juggernaut down. Dr. Kohli?
Yes, good evening, Vineet, and good evening to my fellow panelists and NewsX viewers. What you called, Vineet, as coincidences in the beginning, I call them the backdrop. And, I hate using the pen and a paper in the television shows, but for once, occasionally I don't mind doing that. And I tried to jot down 10 points which explain the backdrop, the Canada angle first. And the Canada angle is because this is the Canadian Pension Fund, who probably where this emanated. They have given all these details to the New York Fed court or whatever. And I think it's an open secret as to what Trudeau government wants, because all the Canadian pension funds are directly or indirectly regulated by the Canadian government. We should not forget that. So there is that angle. Second, of course, is the George Soros angle, with Alex Soros visiting White House more often than not. What was he doing there? What was on the agenda? I think we have to keep that in mind, that there is always the George Soros factory, which is running against countries like India. Then the US transition, we've already discussed that, 2 months to go for the new president to take over. And I think jate ye bhi kar jao, jate wo bhi kar jao. I think that is working on the mind of the Democratic government, that just before we go, I fail to understand the system where the outgoing government's powers after the president-elect are not curtailed, and they can issue orders like ordering Zelensky to go ahead and launch a long-range missile in somewhere in the middle of Russia. I'm really surprised. So I think this is another jate kind of a story. That is another backdrop. Then of course the India story, India growth story, 7% growth rate, on course to become the third largest economy. A shining star across the world, China +1 policy, just about everything about India is going gaga, and there are a lot of heartburns being caused across the world. There are people, and quite a sizable number of people, who cannot see this the India growth story happening. So that is another backdrop. Then comes the Adani hatred. When Hindenburg didn't work, as Gautam said, part 1, part 2 didn't work. They said he bounces back every time. The market cap disappears and suddenly bounces back. So how come this guy can bounce back? I'm sure Mr. Adani should get used to this kind of punting being done from the US on his stocks. So the Adani hatred, because he's related to the infrastructure story, is definitely there. Then thereafter are the stock markets. They cannot see the Indian stock market booming. In fact, this story in stock market, Vineet, has been going on for the last more than 2 months now, where the FPIs and the FIIs are regularly pulling the money out, declaring Indian markets as overvalued. The PE ratios are said to be more than the valuations. So I think the story of exodus of funds from India has been continuing, and this has only added fuel to the fire, I would say. Then a direct hit on the FDI, Vineet. They don't want FDI to come to India. They do not want investors to invest in India. And the point number 9, I haven't been counting. I'm sure the viewers are not counting, but I'm counting. Point number 9 is glorifying India's relation to corruption. That glorify that this country is a corrupt country where officials are corrupt, electricity boards are corrupt, politicians are corrupt, just about everything about to glorify this aspect. And last but not the least is hit India's renewable energy initiative. Solar energy. We are among the top 3 producers of solar energy panels in India at this point of time. I think someone cannot tolerate that. Someone wants to hit that just after COP29 happened. So I think the whole story of this Adani business, somebody needs to substantiate to me.
Absolutely.
How are they watching the phones? How are they watching what when did Mr. Adani went to the washroom? Somebody needs to explain this to me as to how did this come to the surface and how was the bride paid? That is another aspect, Vineet.
Absolutely, you're quite right, and that's exactly why this seems quite unbelievable. We've run out of time, but I appreciate everyone who joined.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.